Jeremiah Bentley and special guest Brian C. Parker of Austin Monthly Magazine.
Here's the story of a man who shall remain nameless.
Hello, friends. Thanks for listening to Moontower Soccer. My name is Landon Cotham. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
And we are also joined by our friend, Brian C. Parker. He is the executive editor at Austin Monthly Magazine, also a contributor both in writing and photography to outlets such as Rolling Stone, Texas Monthly, long list of others. Brian, we're so happy to have you here. Thanks for
having me. No, it's great to be here. And I appreciate you guys including me in this. I'm happy to moderate this conversation a little bit and hear your expertise. This podcast has existed since before Austin FC was a franchise in Austin. So these guys have had a front row seat to seeing what growth in MLS looks like as MLS is sort of taking a seat on the global stage here. So, I'm excited to get into this conversation with y'all. They're also super sharp and not afraid to dig into analyzing everything from financing and roster construction. It's not just about analysis on the field. So,
just part of why we needed Brian here to keep us out of the weeds and accessible to a more general
we can
audience.
go off the rails on a TAM conversation, as is known. Well, I wanted to start from just sort of a general place and set this conversation up. MLS has grown tremendously in the last 5 years that you've been a podcast, and Austin FC has been taking root in this city. So in a more general sense, just kind of talking about what are the factors that are contributing to this growth that we're seeing in MLS?
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint one exact thing. I think it's kind of the confluence of a lot of things, but soccer is more and more popular with the younger U.S. population. I think part of that is also with a growing Latino population in the United States. That is feeding into it. And MLS is kind of riding that wave of realizing that it is a younger, more diverse, more tech-savvy audience that is paying attention to soccer and trying to lean into that a little bit.
And I think you hit on it. Like, and MLS is really riding that wave. I feel like I don't feel like there's anything that special that this league is doing to really capitalize on the growth. And I think we'd probably like to see more of that in the future. And I think it's just as this game grows among this younger audience, this global audience, like MLS is seeing the benefits of it. Hopefully there'll be some investments down the road to like help build that out, build the future of it.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is that's true in a city like Austin, a young city with a lot of a tech sector that is burgeoning and a progressive city. But it sounds like you're saying that's also something that doesn't matter where you are in the country. The contingent that you're going to be reaching in MLS as part of this growth is that young, progressive, sort of tech-savvy market. Is that right, Landon?
Yeah, and I like a place like Austin where Austin probably over-indexes on all of those things compared to your average American city. And so I think part of that is why Austin has done quite well with its MLS market so far. That population, that cutaway of the demographic that we mentioned are the people in whatever city you're mentioning that are more likely to come out to an MLS game.
Yeah, and we've seen other major American sports perhaps waning a little bit. They still have a strong foothold, but MLS is kind of catching up. Did you want to talk a little bit about the sort of valuations even of the market? I think that's something we've seen expand, in the last few years.
Yeah, so original MLS teams came in for essentially free, right? Like, you want a team? Okay, you can have one. And then over time, the buy-in price went up and up and up. And we're to a point now where there's maybe no more teams left. Maybe a handful of teams will be added in years to come. But that closed system has driven up these valuations. We have this graphic here on the screen showing the growth over the last handful of years. And even a team just like Austin FC has, I think they started at just under 500 million when Sportico did their valuations after their first season. I think they're up over 800 million now with, I think, 5 teams valuated at over $1 billion, and Austin sits, I think, 7th in that list.
It's a rapid change. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say this might get into the nerdery of it a little bit, but like that is something that's unique to this league, and like where this league stands in terms of like the global quality of soccer is not that related to where it stands in franchise value. You want to talk about maybe a little bit more about what this system looks like and why it makes the valuations the way they are?
Yeah, it does have a lot to do with kind of the business workings of MLS. They are a closed system. Most of world soccer, there is promotion relegation. You can, if you're bad enough, you'll get sent to the second division, essentially. Doesn't exist here. That combined with relatively rich owners and the population that we were just talking about paying more and more attention, that's why you're seeing this growth here. I think we'll get into here in a bit, like what needs to happen for them to capitalize on that going forward.
Sure, yeah. And, I'm also interested in the culture that comes with soccer. So as America has played catch up here, catching up to this game that has been internationally beloved for, years, and it hasn't seen the same sort of, attention stateside. As it's playing catch up, we're seeing these soccer communities sprout up across the country. And Austin has a super rich community around their soccer franchise. And there are other examples of that, LAFC having a strong culture. So this may be part of what you were talking about with the young contingent, but I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about that kind of culture that takes root in a city that transcends maybe the specific play on the field, but it's more about a community built around that soccer culture.
Yeah, I think I'll start with this. I think we can go into our experience in Austin, and it is like the folks on the screen here, right? The fans, the people that really like are in the stands, that really help them make this culture what it is, and it's people who have come from other places, and there's people who are fans of European teams and South American teams, and I think where culture is really done right and where it's organic is places like Austin, where it's a combination of all that, right? I'm a huge Liverpool fan. And in Austin, we're not trying to like recreate the atmosphere at Anfield. We're trying to take like some parts of that culture and culture from around the world and make it something unique in its own. And they did a great job of that in LA. You're seeing that in Charlotte. Like a lot of these new places with new franchises have been able to like create that culture that's really their own and isn't just a copy of culture from somewhere else.
And I think one of the things that the older MLS franchises have struggled with in markets where it should work. Here in Texas, Dallas and Houston are two teams who have struggled with attendance for a long time now. And I think one thing I've learned is it takes these clubs investing in that and taking marketing seriously and investing in the community around their team to get that going. And I think we've started to see more of that in some of these legacy markets where it wasn't working. And I think it's dawned on them, we have to invest in this too, not just the on-the-field product, not just whatever else. Like, we need to invest in marketing this team to the community and I think they have a steeper hill to climb than in places like Austin, where it's new, like the new shiny thing, and people want to get on board. Whereas in these other markets, it's like there's almost a stink on it from being like the neglected sport for 2 decades.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Houston's especially an example of that, as you mentioned, that has had that difficulty. There's so much going on in that market, and so it's been hard to shake that reputation. I'm curious just to mention a couple of the other markets, and I know the expertise with you all as an Austin FC podcast is in Austin, but I know you also do a great job of following some of these other markets and expansion teams, and as you play those other teams and they come to town, you have conversations on the podcast sometimes with people that are in those markets, whether it's media members or whoever. So it sounds like there are other franchises that are having the same thing. There's kind of a new era of MLS where this stage of the game, a lot of the franchises have seen more success. Could you maybe go through a few of those places that have also seen recent success?
Yeah, I think we were talking backstage. A lot of it comes back to, it's basically, I think it's 2017, right? Was that LAFC? And It's kind of 2017 and forward. Almost all the teams that have come in since then have been more successful. And I think it comes to things like, there's marketing stuff going on around all over the place here, right? And it's like listening to your consumer and like letting your fans help create your culture and create the environment and like buying into that and not going to the fans and saying like, this is the way things are going to be, this is our way or the highway. That's where we've seen success in LA. Atlanta United is a really interesting story because they get a ton of turnout, and there's also, it's a southern city. It's a city that's very deep in football culture, American football culture, and their fan base is almost completely separate from the Atlanta Falcons fan base. There's like 4% overlap between season ticket holders for Atlanta United and Atlanta Falcons. So these places have managed to create their own unique individual culture that speaks to their fans and their fans' interest.
Yeah, and I think every one of those cities since LAFC, some before then, but since that LAFC expansion year, each of these cities has a culture of their own that feels different from any of the other ones. And I think that's really cool and speaks to what you were saying, is letting the soccer people create their own soccer culture, because that is, I think, one of the biggest differences between soccer and other American sports is that I feel like at most American sporting events, you go and you are strictly a consumer there. You are consuming the environment that has been provided for you. And in soccer, it's very much not that way. That you are taking part in the culture, or at least consuming the culture being created by the person next to you.
Yeah, and I've seen that as I'm a member of the media covering Austin FC, but also as a person who's, always roots for the home team and enjoys watching this unfold here, but also being a fan of other major American sports. I've kind of wondered if we can't take a page from the soccer playbook and build some of those communities that you see where you're more invested week to week in the culture, and it's not just about wins or losses on the field or where you are in the standings, but there is this sort of deep-rooted community. I feel like sometimes those major sports sell themselves in a way, and so there's a little less investment in this deep community roots in this way. I'm curious to kind of expand this out now to the global stage. And MLS, we've seen this growth here domestically. It does feel like we're starting to turn a corner a little bit on the global stage. For a long time, it was all export, right? Everything that was the best talent in America might have been grown here, but it was always being exported internationally somewhere, preferably Europe, if those players had a say, probably, but at various places around the globe. It's starting to be more of a voice. MLS has more of a voice now at that global table. Before we get to the sort of pink elephant in the room, if you're following MLS jersey colors, just more generally, what are you seeing in terms of MLS having a voice in the global conversation?
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about Messi here in a second, but outside of that, it is becoming a league that, as the top European superstars start to kind of age out of being able to compete there day in and day out, it's almost like MLS is one of the places that people will ask, like, when are you going to go to MLS? Or the player will bring it up themselves. Kevin De Bruyne is one recently. I think it was like something leaked from his agent or something saying that he would prefer to go to MLS over Saudi Arabia, which is kind of the other competitor for those types of players at this point in time. And the fact that they're considering coming at all is crazy. Kevin De Bruyne has been one of the best players in the Premier League for most of the last decade. And to have a guy like him, even at the age of 35 or whatever it is, would be a huge boon for the league. And that's going to happen more and more.
So, there was an earlier time when this happened, and it was like MLS was a retirement league, and there were guys like Steven Gerrard and Andrea Pirlo that came over and didn't try very hard and weren't very successful. What do you think is different this time? Do you think, are we getting players that are not quite as broken down? Are they more committed? What is it? Because I feel like it's still a little bit of a retirement league, but I feel like it's a little bit different in terms of profile. Obviously, the Miami guys are playing really well right now, despite being advanced in age for pro soccer players.
I think a lot of people learned from Pirlo and Gerrard specifically. That specifically seemed to be like a turning point where I think there were guys who came before them who came over and didn't try that hard, but it was fine because the level wasn't good enough for it to matter. When those two guys came over and didn't try, they were not good in this league. And it showed, like, okay, if you don't come over here and work and take it seriously, you're not going to be good, and the people are going to be mad at you for that. And it's going to hurt your legacy, essentially. So I think people coming over here now know that, like, this is not going to be a cakewalk. I need to put in the effort and try to win, or I'm going to have a bad time in every way.
Is there a tipping point? Like, what does the tipping point look like? I'm thinking about the arcade game where you put the tokens in and you're trying to get all the tokens to fall off and win the jackpot. So for the MLS to hit this jackpot right now, and we keep teasing that we'll get into Messi, but whether it's Messi or something else, what does the tipping point look like for MLS to have this rapid sort of change? It's changing pretty quickly, but what does that tipping point look like?
I think Messi's the time. I mean, the Messi conversation is this. Like, I mean, I think this is the tipping point if MLS does things in the right way, because there's no other star in the world quite like Messi that is going to get this kind of international attention. And hopefully the lesson that the league takes from this and the owners take from this is if you invest money up front, the attention, the notoriety, the fans, the global interest will come, because I feel like it's been a lot of the owners in the league are holding back, and traditionally in the past held back and like not wanted to spend. They're like, no, we want to see these growth and results before we're going to spend. And now I think Messi has shown that you can flip that playbook around, that you can invest, and then all the financial benefits that you want will come after the fact.
Yeah, I think your analogy here is perfect, though, because Messi is one large coin you put into that machine, but it's going to take more. They're going to have to keep putting coins in, and I think it needs to get to a point where there's only one Messi, right? There's nobody else like him, and so you can't go get another Messi.
How important is it, do you think, again, to take the kind of local lens and look at this, and this I think can be applied to other MLS franchises. It doesn't have to be just Austin, but I know that Austin here in town, Rodolfo Borrell coming in to Austin, who's a European, Premier League talent, not on the pitch, but in on the side of sporting director and sort of talent acquisition and thinking about things like that. How important do you see that piece being in moving MLS forward? Is it as important as the talent on the field, or no?
I think it is on several levels, one of which being U.S. soccer has seemed to be fairly insular for most of its modern existence, and you would hear stories of European coaches coming over, European sporting directors coming over, and really struggling to adapt to the strange animal that MLS is. And I think as they integrate themselves into like the global player market, and as you're saying, that's now a two-way market. We're not just exporting; we're bringing bigger names over this direction too. As it can get more culturally integrated on the business side into the European and global model, that will make it different, because guys like Rodolfo Borrell are going to start bringing in the players they knew from Europe, and it's going to not be so different from every other league in the future.
Yeah, it's a more fluid conversation. One term that I hear thrown around a lot is kind of like MLS 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and it feels like we're in this 3.0 stage. That if 1.0 was the era you were talking about, where teams are easy to come by, if you want to get in on the ground floor, you can. 2.0 being, and you tell me maybe the arrival of David Beckham, being this era where there is a long growth period, from the mid-aughts to say now-ish, 2020-ish or something like that. And then now we're in this whole new phase. So it seems like that's happening. I don't know if you think there's a sort of, how much longer until we are on the par of the other major American sports? I think that Landon, you have some interesting ideas about NHL, I think.
Well, yeah, we were talking the other day, and you asked like, how long is it going to take? And I said, it's going to be forever. But I think in this conversation, I was thinking NFL specifically, when really NFL is leagues above even NBA, which is the number 2 in most metrics you can look at. MLS is much closer to the pack. It's not that close to NFL, but it's much closer to the pack than I would have guessed, I think, but it's already surpassed NHL in most metrics. As far as average attendance, it is 3rd in the country now, only behind NFL and MLB, actually, for average attendance. So it is catching that pack. I think it is, if you look, again, talking about the valuations, I think there's, like, the MLS pack is starting to creep into the NHL pack, and I'm sure eventually we'll get closer to the other sports as well. But with like the trending younger demographics watching less of the other major sports, younger kids are playing more soccer for many reasons, but I think part of being that parents don't want their kids playing American football anymore. And so there's a lot of factors that are not just theories, like there's data to back these things up that are all pouring into soccer is going to keep growing, and MLS, if they play their cards right, can continue to ride that wave and be maybe in the next, I don't know, 15, 20 years in the conversation as like, okay, it's not a big four anymore. There's a big five as far as major American sports go.
Yeah, I think if you look at the expansion, the cities that MLS has expanded to recently kind of reflect that too, right? Like Austin, Nashville, Charlotte, Atlanta to an extent. These are like, younger, modern cities with a bigger piece of this population and typically not as much fight for attention. I mean, one of the factors that makes Austin so successful, which can't be overlooked, is the fact that it's the only pro sports franchise in this city. But I think you see like forward expansion, like San Diego is like the next one up, and that's another like young, happening, growing city. And so I think the league has been smart about where they're placing teams, which is going to help create that excitement over time.
Yeah, and this is some of the organic growth that you nodded to at the beginning of this conversation, Landon, just that the league is growing kind of regardless of if anyone wants it to grow or not. It's a natural thing that's happening. When we talk about more intentional growth, I'm curious to, we've teased this several times. So to get to the Messi component, this is this tipping point we're seeing right now where certainly when Inter Miami comes to town, everybody wants a ticket. I've seen a lot of people complaining about the price of tickets when Inter Miami comes to town, complaining about not being able to get tickets to the match when Inter Miami comes to town, whether that's people who wanted to see Messi or just your natural fans who just want to go to the match and now can't go to the match because Messi's coming to town. So there's a lot of perspectives on what that means. I'm curious about intentional ways that MLS and individual franchises, Austin and others around the country, can maximize what it means to have a superstar, an international superstar like Messi playing in the league.
Yeah, well, we kind of hinted at this before, but MLS is a single entity organization, meaning there is profit sharing going on between all of these teams. And so that rising tide literally lifts all boats. Like they are sharing some of that money with Austin and any other team. But I think for the other teams in the league, one of the main things it does is just raises the profile of the league. And I think it was already trending that way, but it is legitimizing MLS in a way that would have been hard to do to the same level with anybody or anything else besides him.
You said earlier there's only one Messi. It's a singular entity. You can't have another one. But what does the next Messi look like? If it's not Messi, even if it's not going to be that level, what's the next defection look like? Is it just any Premier League player coming over, or is there a specific Premier League player on the horizon, or what do you think that next phase looks like?
I mean, hopefully it's not Mbappe 15 years from now, right?
That would be a long way. That would be a long way.
That's a long way out. I mean, I think a guy like Kevin De Bruyne holds a profile that's not Messi, but
Antoine Griezmann has been talking for years about wanting to come to MLS, so he'll end up here eventually. Olivier Giroud is one. It's like these are World Cup winners that are past their prime, but like Giroud's starting for AC Milan every week. He's not a scrub. He's not past it. So, like, I think the next phase, because again there is no Messi, but you aim at these like Messi minuses, we'll call them, of still like world-class players, slightly aging out to where they're playing day in and day out in like a top 10 club in the world, and they can come have a really good lifestyle, make some good money, and be a superstar in the U.S.
Yeah, let me see if I can ask you this without it. It feels very clunky in my mind already, so we'll see if I can get through it. But
Great.
But you're talking about Messi minuses and top tier talent, people that are at the top of the league or really talented, kind of coming here as an afterthought. What or when does it look like when instead of waiting on that top talent to come, we're looking at more the bottom of that Premier League or those top tier leagues in Italy or in Spain, where they're more on the cusp of making that roster there, and instead of staying there and trying to grind it out and get it a spot on that roster in a cup, Barcelona or AC Milan or an English Premier League team, that instead they say, I'm going to go to MLS and I'm going to build up from the bottom of MLS. Are we ways out from that, or is that around the corner?
That's happening. That's happening now.
Yeah.
I think there was a stretch for a while. Atlanta United sold a player named Miguel Almiron to Newcastle for $25 million or something. And so every team in the league was like, we're going to go buy a young South American. He's going to kill it here for 2 years, and then we're going to sell him for a boatload of money. And that's maybe happened like one other time since 2018 when that happened. So I feel like clubs are putting fewer eggs in that basket now. And some of the biggest difference makers in the league over the last few years are these like 26, 27-year-olds who were the best player on a team that got relegated in France last season. It's like these difference makers in big leagues, not for the top teams, but like in these big 5 European leagues who are good players in those leagues have started to come to MLS, and teams are focusing on those guys. So they don't do as much for the profile and like the big superstar names, but as far as raising the quality on the field, these guys are absolutely doing that, which is part of the fight that MLS is in. Is pay attention because Messi's playing, but once you watch, like, oh, these teams are actually quite good, I'm gonna keep watching.
Yeah, that was something I heard as Austin FC was taking root here, is that people saw it as maybe not the best quality product, and so it's important to change that as you move forward and become not only about name brand but also about quality on the field. So, well, in addition to Messi, as far as taking a seat at the global soccer table, I mean, the U.S. is going to do that. North America is going to do that, coming up here because we have this opportunity to be the place that the World Cup is going to be played. So that feels to me like another extremely ripe opportunity to center what's happening in America, American soccer efforts. What do you think maximizing, return on investment and the potential for what it looks like for the U.S. to center themselves in this conversation as the World Cup comes here?
Yeah, I think this is the question about like why it's been 50 years. For 50 years, soccer's been like the next big thing in America, right? From the NASL to various leagues and various, like, why is it going to be different this time? And I feel like it's the potential combination of high-profile players like Messi, the World Cup, this deal with Apple TV, which I know is kind of controversial because you're taking games off local broadcast, but there's a lot of additional revenue rights and international visibility in there. So there's the opportunity if we get into 2026, maybe there's a long run for this American U.S. team that's going to be probably like the closest thing to a golden generation, like for all those things to come together, this to be it. But there's still a lot of things that have to go right and have to be hit right, and a lot of smart decisions have to be made to do that. But I think this is where there's like the potential for transformational growth.
Yeah, the eyeballs are going to come, right? Like Messi is bringing in a lot of people who wouldn't pay attention normally. The World Cup will do the same. The Women's World Cup this summer it's not in the U.S., but people get excited about soccer in those moments in this country. MLS needs to, when these people are paying attention, show them a good product and give them a reason to continue to pay attention.
Do you think it has the potential to be an accelerant that exceeds expectation? I mean, maybe that's an obvious yes, but what do you see what would it look like if that accelerant was even, more powerful than we expect it to be? Like, to your point, people are going to be watching. The U.S. is going to be in the spotlight. But what does it look like if it exceeds all expectations? Could we see this? What ways could we see it accelerate soccer attention on the U.S. globally?
Well, in 1994, when the U.S. hosted the World Cup, and then shortly after brought David Beckham in, like that was a very similar period of time as what we're in now. The league grew so much in the couple of decades after that. I think it's that kind of turning point that if they play their cards right, Don Garber, MLS commissioner, has said, I want this league to be top 5 in the world. We're a fair ways away from that, maybe top 10 right now. But in 15 years, 20 years, I think that's it's not a crazy thing to say that MLS could be nipping at the heels of those top 5 in Europe.
And we're talking about classic international brands that have existed for 100 years. So
Yeah.
It's amazing to think a team like Austin FC or Charlotte, who just got started, could be at that level in a short time. So, cool. Well, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate Sportico for hosting us here today, and Landon and Jeremiah, Moontower Soccer, asking me to come talk with y'all today. This has been fantastic. And to throw back to the valuations in this whole conversation around growth that we're talking about, I think Sportico does a great job of keeping track of the growth of MLS and what it looks like on a global stage.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for
Yeah.
talking with us today, Brian. You can find us anywhere you get podcasts, and then social media, all at Moontower Soccer. We put out a new show every Tuesday. So if you're interested in Austin FC or learning more about MLS, check it out.
All right. Thank y'all.
Thanks,
Thank
y'all.
you.